Good evening. My name is Brian Liminen, and this is my informative speech for Communications 110, Public Speaking. Today is March 30th, 2011, and my camera person will pan and introduce my audience.
This is Brandon.
Neighbor.
Darren, another neighbor. Brittany, daughter. Jessica, neighbor. And Bradley, son.
Peace.
And I'm Brooke, and I'm going to quickly take my seat.
Could I have everyone take a handout? This is my visual aid for this class. Take one and please pass it on. While that's being passed around, I'll tell you a little bit about this informative speech. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Civil War weaponry and more specifically the mini ball and how it revolutionized warfare as we know it and firearms as they were known at that time. So most people think of the Civil War and the Civil War weapons in general as being archaic, slow, obsolete weapons. And so I'm going to ask a few questions to see if this consensus is true. Who believes that Civil War weapons were inaccurate? That is, they often failed to hit their intended target. Okay?
It depends on what distance.
Okay, at reasonable distances. That in the course of a battle, a bullet had little likelihood of hitting its intended target. Okay, so we've got 5 out of 7 that believe that. Very good. Who believes that Civil War weapons took a great deal of time to reload? Okay, we've got 7 out of 7. Who believes that weapons of the Civil War were unreliable? Okay, 1 out of 7. That's okay. Who has ever heard of the mini ball? You need not know what it is, just simply have heard the term before. 1 out of 7. Very good. Okay? If you answered yes to the first 3 and no to the last question, then our education system has failed you. In the realm of American history, I'm going to tell you why. To start, I'm going to give you an overview of firearms leading up to the Civil War. The first firearm that we're going to talk about is the smoothbore musket. A smoothbore musket was a firearm that fired a single projectile. Its bore, or barrel, the inside, was basically a smooth cylinder. Okay? The bullet slid down easily because it was slightly smaller than the barrel with which it slid down. And then would come out, once the gunpowder was ignited, generate the force and pressure to propel the bullet. Now what this required in order for the bullet to slide down the barrel was that the bullet is slightly smaller than the barrel, which makes it slide in and slide out easily. And when it would come out at a relatively low speed, and it had no spin on it. It was basically like a pitcher throwing a knuckleball, if you're familiar with baseball. The ball would come out straight and begin encountering the air and meet its resistance. Okay? The next advancement in firearms was the rifled musket. If you look at your diagram right here, this shows rifling inside a barrel. Rifling is a series of grooves inside a barrel, and they are spiral in their nature as it goes down the barrel. So what this does is it imparts spin on the bullet as it comes out of the barrel, which gives the bullet stability in flight. Much like how a football is thrown. A football is thrown with spin imparted on it, which gives it stability in flight and makes it to its intended receiver because of its accuracy. Now the inherent disadvantage to the rifling at that time was it requires a tight seal between the bullet and the barrel. So the bullet actually has to be the exact diameter of the barrel. Now the problem this creates is that the bullet does not slide down the barrel easily. I do have a black powder rifle here. Okay, this is unloaded. I have no gunpowder anywhere near me. It's simply as an example. So as the firer would push the bullet down the barrel, it would require a great deal of force to force a lead bullet tightly down a barrel, and it took a great deal of time. Now, once the rifle was loaded, it would fire a very accurate bullet at its target, but took a great deal of time to reload. So, the application in which people would use rifles would be in hunting. So if someone was hunting for sport or hunting for meat, they would typically use a rifle because they only needed to fire one shot. But in military applications, more than one shot was necessary. So armies at the time made the decision to go with muskets, which were fast to reload. That way they could have their soldiers fire numerous rounds, and they wouldn't need that accuracy of a rifle. They didn't want to sacrifice the time it took to reload. Now, aside from the bullets, another advancement that was occurring at the time was the firing mechanism. If you look right here, this is a flintlock firing mechanism. Okay? What a flintlock did was it had a hammer with a clamp on it, and that clamp would hold a piece of flint stone. When the weapon was fired, that hammer would move forward and strike the frizzen, which is basically a metal file. It had a rough edge on it. When the stone struck it, it would make a spark. Now what the firer had to do was, in the flash pan right here, was they would have to place a small amount of gunpowder in the flash pan. The spark would ignite the powder in the flash pan, which would then feed some heat into the chamber and ignite the gunpowder that's in the barrel. Has anyone ever heard the term flash in the pan?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what's it mean?
I'm not sure.
A flash in the pan is something that seems like it's going to work or seems like a great idea, but then fizzles out and becomes nothing. This actually dates back to firearms. A flash in the pan would be when the firer attempts to shoot the rifle, they get a spark in the pan, but it fails to ignite the gunpowder in the barrel. The bullet never fires out of the barrel. That's where you get flash in the pan. Now, the inherent disadvantages of the flintlock mechanism were that the firer had to take another step in firing, and that was place a little bit of gunpowder in the flash pan. Okay, now if it was raining outside, and they had this exposed flash pan on the outside of their gunpowder is going to get wet, and it's not going to work. Or, if they suddenly need to move around, set their rifle down, drop their rifle for any reason, that powder is going to fall out of the flash pan, and that gun is now rendered unfireable until another amount of powder is placed in the flash pan. Now what happened in the mid-1800s, due to advances in chemistry, we moved on to the percussion lock mechanism. What the percussion lock did was it used a small primer cap, okay, very tiny, about that big, and it was filled with a dry chemical compound, and what happens to this chemical compound is when it is struck suddenly, it creates a spark. This was tremendously advantageous to the world of firearms, because now they had a simple, dry, stable way to initiate spark to fire a weapon. All it required was the firer to, each time he was going to fire, place one of these priming caps onto the nipple of the firing mechanism, and then he would cock the hammer, fire the weapon. That would provide the spark to ignite the powder that he placed on the barrel. So now we've taken care of that disadvantage of wet weather, of walking, of moving around, and we've also eliminated a step. He no longer has to place powder in the flash pan. So now we've sped up the reloading process for weapons at the time through the percussion mechanism. Now, another technological advancement of the mid-1800s was the metallic cartridge. What we know today, a brass casing with a primer cap on the bottom that is chemically identical to the primer cap used in the percussion lock mechanism, filled with gunpowder and a bullet on top. Okay, most people are familiar with its operation today. This was available in the mid-1800s, before the beginning of the Civil War. But in 1849, there was a French captain named Minier who came up with an idea that would create a compromise between the time it took to reload a rifle musket. What he did was he took a regular conical bullet like this, and he created a concave bottom to it. And he made it slightly smaller than the barrel of the rifle. That way it would slide down the barrel easily, but when the weapon was fired, that burning gunpowder in the bottom of the barrel would heat up, expand, and take that concave bottom and actually flare it out like a cup. Flare it out, it would then grab the rifling of the barrel, spin as it exited the barrel, and create the tight seal that fighters had encountered when they were using a rifled musket. So what this did, if you remember nothing else, was Minié bridged the gap between time and accuracy. People used smoothbore muskets because they could reload quickly, or they used rifled muskets for one round of really good, accurate fire. What Minié did was brought those two together. Now, a person could load quickly and fire accurately, which revolutionized the world as we knew it in military terms at that time. Now, his name was spelled M-I-N-I-E, which in French is pronounced Minié, but Americans, not knowing the French pronunciation, saw that as mini. So, the mini ball was not smaller than anything else. And a lot of people also think, those who are familiar with the mini ball and have heard about it in history class, think that its conical design is what caused injuries to a lot of Civil War soldiers. Not so. The conical bullet was available long before the Civil War. But in 1849, the mini ball bridged that gap. That is what made the mini ball so devastating on the battlefield. So what did this do to tactics at the time? Well, in the days of rifled muskets, the accurate range for a rifled musket was about 75 yards. A soldier could hit the enemy soldier at about 75 yards. Now, with the mini ball, with accurate fire out of a rifled musket, they could hit soldiers at 300, 400, and expert marksmen could reach out to over 500 yards. That's an increase of 5-6 times the distance, which altered the way wars were fought. Typically, an advancing army who was advancing on a defensive position, the defenders would not even open fire until the attackers were about 75 yards away, which made most combat at that time close quarters combat. Now, with the advent of the mini ball, the defenders would begin opening fire while the attackers were still 400 yards away. That means the attackers walked for 400 yards being shot at and suffered tremendous losses because of it. And this created some changes to military tactics at the time that are still being used today. For example, digging positions. Prior to the mini ball and the advancement of its range, soldiers rarely ever dug foxholes, as they're sometimes called, or built barricades. They would simply march onto the battlefield and maneuver on the field against one another. What the mini ball did, in its advancements in technology, caused soldiers to begin to fortify their positions, because the attackers as well could fire from long ranges. Commanders had to learn from their failures and adapt to new technology. And I have in my hand, as an example, a modern day black powder bullet that modern hunters today who use black powder rifles use. I want to pass a couple of these around and take a look at its design. This is the bullet only, there's no gunpowder. Take a look at the bottom of it. Okay. What do you notice about it? Bradley?
There's a little dot in there that looks almost like bronze.
Yep. That's because the bullet is made out of copper. Okay, what do you see about the shape of it, though? Compare it to the mini ball in this picture.
Part of it is green.
Okay. Not so much the color, but the shape.
I don't see those stripy hill things.
That's correct. Okay. This is an older bullet, and the what you call stripes were the bands from the mold in which they cast the bullet. But you notice the concave design in the bottom.